Hey team, welcome to Colbyashi Maru, the show where devs around the world boldly face off against the most logical tools on the web. I'm Colby Fayok, your Space Jelly commander and host of today's challenge. Today we have James Quick. James is a developer advocate at Auth0. He also does a ton of awesome content creation on his YouTube channel at youtube.com/JamesQQuick. And he builds and supports an awesome Discord community called Learn, Build, Teach. And he also has a new podcast coming up with co-host Amy Dutton, where you can check it out at compress.fm. So let's bring him in. Hey, James, do you want to give a quick intro about yourself? And do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think you got most of it, to be honest. Yeah, I'm a developer advocate at Auth0. I go by like developer, speaker, and teacher, and then general like content creator. So you'll catch me in a lot of what you said on Twitch, on YouTube, that sort of stuff. And then you gave a shout out to the two other things that are pretty cool: the Learn, Build, Teach Discord community, which is a lot of fun that you are part of, and
Yes.
then also the new podcast that Amy and I are launching in a couple of weeks. We've recorded a few episodes and are really, really excited to launch that. So if you're interested in updates on compress.fm, there's some details, and then there's sign up for the newsletter for more info.
Awesome. Well, for those of you who aren't actually familiar with Colbyashi Maru, our guest will have 1 hour to complete their project challenge. Through that time, James will try to talk out loud and as he's working through the challenge. I'll also be asking questions along the way, but if you, the audience, have any questions, make sure to send it in the chat and I'll field them over to James. So today, James will be facing off against automating social images with Airtable, Cloudinary, and serverless functions. If James doesn't finish the challenge, all's not lost. We'll see if we have enough time to finish up, or we'll just kind of chat about what the next steps would be. So, James, before we actually dive in, did you want to talk about a little bit about the tools that you're going to use and what you're going to be building?
Yeah. I asked you this right before, like if you create your images for these streams every time manually, and you said yes. And in some ways it's not that difficult, right? Like you get a new image from somebody, you update a piece of text in Figma. So it's not that bad, but I wanted it to be completely automated. And what I do with my live streams is I have a form that's in Airtable. And so I send people a form, hey, can you fill out this information? Which includes their name, their title, their email if I need that, a potential title for a stream, what else? And then a link to an image for them. I've actually got yours up that I'll use in this demo.
Nice.
So I figured like all that information is there, all the information that I would need for the actual cover image. So how can I turn this into a thing that's completely automated? So from Airtable, the cool thing is they have scripts that you can kind of click a button and then trigger some sort of script. You can write the JavaScript right inside of their editor, which is surprisingly pretty good. Like it has IntelliSense and all kinds of stuff, which is
Interesting.
nice. And what I do is I just have that thing like send a request over, including the information about the stream. We'll see this in a second: the name, the title, the guest title, the date, the image URL, and then it will generate the image or send that over to a serverless function in Netlify. That thing will generate a unique URL that represents the final image in Cloudinary. So the way Cloudinary works is you have like kind of a root URL for an image, and then you can add these additional transformations on top of it, and they really just become parts of the URL. So really, it's creating a really fancy URL, and then that's the URL to the final image for the stream.
Yeah, Cloudinary is awesome. I love how flexible the just a URL API makes creating
Yep.
images like that. So I'm excited to
Yeah,
see what you do today. So yeah, if you're ready to go, I think we can get started. Yeah, you ready to go?
I guess that means like putting the timer on and like all
Yes,
these
sir.
things. I guess so. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Cool. Okay. Well, I will bring up your screen and we see it there. And I will count down in three, two, one. Let's go.
Yeah. First of all, shout out to everybody in the chat. What's going on, everyone? All right. So I pulled this up just to kind of show what these cover images look like. This is Ciora is coming on stream this Friday. So shout out to that stream. I didn't mean to self promote my stream on yours. This is just about cover images. So I hope that's
All good.
okay.
All good.
So this is what it looks like. Again, you can see like things that are going to stay the same is this background, the learning quick thing in the top left, my image, and that's basically it. So the things that change then are the image for the guest, the title, the guest name, and then the guest title. So those are the things that we need to add programmatically. And then inside of Airtable, this is where I receive my form submission. So here's a sneak peek at some of the upcoming streams, including some of the ones that I haven't actually gotten scheduled yet. But inside of here, I've got this generate button, and that triggers a script to call a serverless function, blah, blah, blah. So we may not actually like write the script inside of Airtable today. What we're going to focus on is building that serverless function, interacting with Cloudinary, taking in the inputs from the user, and then having that portion of it ready. And then I'll show you what the script looks like inside of Airtable of how it calls that serverless function.
That sounds good.
So I created a starter project, and just I'll cover everything that's here, which is very little. But just so you think I didn't like cheat with too much starting stuff, I've got a repository that's private on GitHub. It's called Colby Test. It has an index HTML page which says, "Hey, this doesn't really serve much of a function, so we can kind of ignore that." I have a get ignore file which says to ignore .env files for those kind of variables, as well as node modules. And then I have a .env file, and what's inside of there are my credentials for Cloudinary. And let me go ahead and open that up to show this to people what it looks like. Let's go ahead and log in here. And inside of Cloudinary, I've got my images set up where they're inside of a folder called Learning Quick. So these are for my Learning Quick streams. And you'll see in here that there is a headshot or a profile picture for all the people that I've had on stream, which is an amazing list of guests, by the way. And then I also have this LGBG -2 for different reasons. So this is basically the main image. So what we're going to do is end up uploading a guest image to Cloudinary, and then saying, "Hey, take this base image as the background, throw the text on top of it, throw the guest image on top of that, and then that will be hopefully a successful thumbnail." So that's where some of those things come from. Let's start by installing a few dependencies in here. So inside of this repository, we'll need to install the .env package. This will allow us to use environment variables from a .env file. We will also install the Cloudinary package. We can use the Cloudinary package to generate that unique URL that we talked about. And I think that might be it in this case. Let's start by doing that.
So what kind of things are good to store in a .env file?
Yeah, anything private or that differs between environments. So the easy answer is like anything that's private, API keys, secret keys, that kind of stuff. But then also from a configuration standpoint, one of the things you don't want to do is like include hard code things into your project that might change depending on where it's deployed or what environment
API
it's running in.
endpoints.
Yeah, that sort of stuff. So things that are kind of configurable, and then things that are private are good to put inside of your .env files. And just to reiterate, the private aspect of that, they go there because you don't check those things in the source code, because other people can find them and they can use them. So I have the Netlify CLI installed. And what that allows me to do is it allows me to run Netlify dev, which kind of runs Netlify locally in a really sweet, cool way. And so what we'll do is we'll create a folder for our serverless functions, and then we'll tell Netlify where those serverless functions are, so that when we run Netlify dev, it will know where to find the functions and how to serve them. So we'll first create a Netlify TOML config file. Let us know, Colby, if you can keep an eye on the chat. Let me know if this is big enough for people to see. And if not, I can bump it up a little bit. But I want to define a build parameter in here for functions, and just say the directory where my serverless functions are going to be is inside of a folder called functions. And that's all I need to do in terms of Netlify configuration. I think this might have actually, does anybody know this? I think they changed this to where you don't even have to specify it now, maybe. Open question for people that are there in chat. Anyway.
That was a good question.
Yeah. So from there, we can create that functions directory, and we'll start with like a hello world JS. And the way these things work is you're basically defining a function in here. Actually, you're exporting a function called handler. So you do an exports.handler, and then this thing is going to be most often an async function that takes in an event, some other things that we don't necessarily need. So I'm just sticking with event here. And what we can do, since we have the serverless function defined, is just to start, we can return an object that has a status code of 200 and then a body of an object that has a message that says hello world. And when you do this in Netlify, you have to JSON.stringify. So you have to take that JSON data, that object, and you have to stringify that thing for it to be able to be passed out appropriately. Did we get any feedback on size?
No questions
Nothing
yet.
yet.
No.
Okay, cool. If you need a bump in size or anything like that, just let me know. So what we should do with this in place, again, we have our functions directory. We told Netlify where to find our functions directory. We created a file inside of that functions directory, and then we add a handler to what's exported from here. And that should be all we have to do to get started. So what I'll do is I'll run the Netlify dev command. Netlify dev does two things. It will run kind of your UI, so kind of your static site. It will run that at the same time as it will always, reading some of the chats here, as well as it will run the serverless functions. So the first thing is just to show that it's running the front end. We can see this hey, remember that index HTML that just had an H1? Hey, that works. Just to see. And then also what Netlify will do is it will take your functions that are defined in that functions directory, and it will basically take the name of the file and it will have that be an endpoint. So it'll be localhost 8888 / this is a little odd. You can reconfigure this, but by default it's .netlify /functions / and then that file name, hello world. So hopefully what this will do is that actually triggered the serverless function. You can see that it got a GET request to this endpoint, and it responded back with JSON, which is pretty cool. So in that, I don't know how many minutes that was, that few minutes, we're able to get started with serverless functions.
Yeah, like 5 minutes.
Yeah. Anyway, imposter engineer, thank you for trying to put pressure on me. I appreciate that, I guess. I bumped it up once. Let me see. Maybe that'll be a little bit better. Hopefully that's a little bit more visible for people to see. So our next thing is we want to get into the actual Cloudinary piece. And I'm going to I like to create kind of a utils directory inside of functions and then have a file for Cloudinary.js. And what we're going to do is we're going to get a reference to require Cloudinary. We're going to require that thing, and then we'll set its config. So we'll do cloudinary.config, and then we'll pass in a few different properties. There's the cloud name, which is, I guess, just kind of a unique identifier for a space in Cloudinary. I don't know if there's a better way to put that.
I think that sounds kind of accurate.
Okay.
I know we have Dom in here, so maybe he'll correct us. But
that's what I was kind of in my mind. I was like, all right, Dom will tell me. So this is going to come from environment variables, in this case, cloud name. So again, those come from that .env file. And one of the things that we have to do to be able to access these while we're running locally is require the .env package and then call its config function. That will allow us to take in the variables from that .env file and reference them like this. When we get into actually Netlify, which we may or may not actually deploy this, but if we were in Netlify, this would come from there, defining that in their GUI. All right, then we have the API key property. This is going to come from something similar, Cloudinary API key. All right, and then API secret will come from Cloudinary API secret.
Dom pretty much confirmed your thinking there, though he used public identifier. So
okay,
that's the technical term.
Okay, so now okay, all right. Good thing we have people, me representing these companies, and they're in the background like, nope, nope, that's not it. Glad to have the support from people in the chat. So what I want to do with this thing is basically just configure Cloudinary and then export that thing is what we're looking to do. So hopefully that means, and maybe just a test to make sure this works, is we can import Cloudinary from utils Cloudinary, and I think I did that as a not default, so it would look something like this. And I think we should be good if it does that import. Hopefully that means that it's configured correctly. Otherwise, it would have thrown an error, I think. So actually what we want to do is we no longer need like the hello world thing. So we can maybe rename this to cover. And I think this will mess up. I can't remember if Netlify will pick this up or not. Just to be safe, I'm going to restart since I basically got rid of one of the endpoints and then created another one. So I'm going to restart just to be sure that it picks it up as cover. And then if I test this and rename the endpoint to cover, it failed. Let's see. Import. Oh, because I am not in TypeScript or I'm in
I
modules
gotcha.
from Node. So this will be the require syntax like this. This one too. Yeah, syntax. Our favorite. All right, now let's try to give that a go. That still returns, no errors in here. So I hope that means we're good. So what I want to do, I actually want this to be a post request. And I want it to take in those extra bits of information that we'll need to create the image. So we can say our body is going to be json.parse event.body. And then maybe just for testing, let's log out the body here. So I could do some checking in here to make sure if it's not, if they send a GET request to ignore it, blah, blah, blah. I'm just going to, I'm going to skip that and just kind of assume I'm going to get a post request to this endpoint. And the way I'll test this is I've also got Postman open. This is actually very small.
There we
Let's see
go.
if we can bump that up. Yep. And inside of here, I am sending not a delete request, but a post request to that same endpoint that we just looked at. So localhost 8888.netlify/function/cover. And then here's the information for this hypothetical stream. The title is going to be a cool Jamstack stream. Colby Fayok is going to be the guest. Colby's title is a cool developer. And then I have the URL to your Twitter image here. So I just grabbed that thing. I assume that's okay. And
I don't think anybody's defined me as cool before, but I'll take it.
This is, I guess, there's the first time for everyone. And this is when you get to control the messaging on things like this. This is when you just tag yourself as cool and damn what other people say is how I approach this. So
Exactly.
what I want to see hopefully is that this returns with hello world. So that looks good. And then also in the logs, I get to see these different pieces that I care about, which is good. So one of the things, we're going to need to do two things. We're going to need to upload the guest image, and then we will create the full cover image. So those are the two things we need to do. To do the first, to create the guest image, let's take the guest name property. So let's say we'll destructure guest name from body. And then I want to say like formatted name or something. And what I want to do is basically replace the space in your name with a hyphen. That way I can use it as a file name is basically what that will do. So I want to take guest name dot replace, and I want to replace the space with a hyphen. And just
so do you typically is this the way that you do it? Do you typically kind of like just avoid special characters then when you handle that?
Yeah, I don't know that it would actually be a problem or not. Dom, you could jump in and let me know in Cloudinary. But yeah, typically the safer thing to do is to not have spaces at the very least in your URLs. So this is an easy way to just replace that with a hyphen and hopefully be good. Let's see if we run this again, see the same thing there, and then we see Colby-Fayok. So I just wanted to make sure that thing looks good. That looks like what I want to do. Next, and actually we probably don't actually need to import Cloudinary here. What we can do instead is just add a couple of functions in here for our image uploading and creation. So the first one is, I use this really long name of like upload guest profile pic if not exists, like if it doesn't exist then upload it. I'm gonna shorten this a little bit to be upload, let's say guest image, and we'll upload the guest image. This is an async function that will take in the guest image name and then the guest image URL. So the URL is that like Twitter URL for your profile picture. The guest image name is that formatted name that we just created. And what we'll do is we'll take our Cloudinary, we'll grab the uploader, and let me make sure there's one other thing that sometimes I forget to do. Let me make sure I get the right thing, which I did not. With Cloudinary, getting the V2 here. I think that's a small thing that kind of gets overlooked sometimes. So I want to make sure I'm on V2 of Cloudinary and use that. So with that in place, I want to take the Cloudinary. I want to call the uploader. I want to call upload. And then what I need to pass it is two things. One is the guest image URL. So that's the image that basically the image that I want to upload to Cloudinary. Where does it come from? And in this case, I'm using a public URL. And then also pass in a configuration object with a public ID property. I want to put it inside of that learning quick folder, if you remember that inside of Cloudinary, and then slash, and I'll use the guest image name. Like that.
And that learning quick, just to clarify, that's a Cloudinary organization folder, correct?
Yes. Yep. So inside of this folder here, that's the folder that we're basically trying to put this inside of. Yeah. So let's look at, let's see if we get the response back and then log out the response. There's no better way to debug here. We'll also export this function. And again, what we're doing, if we define the function correctly, is we're taking in a name for the file, basically, and then a URL to a publicly accessible image that we want to save in Cloudinary. So that should be res. Let's do that. Let's give this a shot. So let's take in, we've got our formatted name, and then we have, what did we call that property? The guest image URL. So let's destructure those two things.
And I love that you're using Postman. It's such a great way to test these things.
There's really, like, once you get into anything past a Git, like, you have to use some sort of tool to help you test them. Insomnia is one that people have talked a lot about that they seem to enjoy. I've never used it either. Postman's been with me for a while. I'm going to try to do something a little sneaky here. What's the name? What did we call that function? We called it upload guest image. Notice I'm getting some auto imports in here, which is pretty sweet. So when I do that, it's going to go ahead and import this function. And I'm going to call this by passing in the guest name and then the guest image URL. And actually, this should not be the guest name. It should be the formatted name, the one where we replaced those that space with a hyphen. I want to await this to make sure that it gets done before we go back. So this is really the first, I mean, I've written some code. This is the first real moment of truth to see if the first thing is going to work. So drum roll, do you have any drum roll sound effects? Do you have
No,
those?
I don't have sound effects yet, but I mean, as long as this isn't too loud, let's see. Can you hear it?
Yeah, I hear it. Let's give it a shot. All right. So I'm going to send this request again. Hopefully what it will do is upload that image to Cloudinary. No errors. That's a good sign. We see a URL to that image. Now, if we come back to Cloudinary, I think we need to do a refresh in here. Hopefully, we'll see. Colby Fayok lives on in my my Cloudinary images, which I think is pretty sweet.
Success.
Yeah. How am I doing? I haven't paid attention to chat. I hate not being able to see chat, but I'm trying to race against the clock too.
So you have just over 40 minutes left. I was just about to update you.
Cool. Sweet. Couple people like Insomnia. Nice. Anyway, hello chat people. I am heads down.
It sounds like it's popular for GraphQL. I know Postman can do GraphQL though, if you configure it too.
Oh, cool. I have not done that. So that's good to know. By the way, shout out again if you see any familiar faces on here. I've had some pretty amazing people on stream. Going back to a couple of the people that are in chat have been on here as well.
Yeah, I might have to take some inspiration for bringing people on here.
Yeah, just like take a screenshot of this list
Exactly.
and be like, all right, we're gonna have you join us. Okay, so that's good. The cool thing is, and this may not be the most performant way. I can't remember. Maybe Dom can define this as well. If I run this again, it's not going to have any issues because it's going to I think what it will do, it may actually replace this image. I'm not sure. Either it sees that Colby dash Fayok already exists and it replaces it, or it sees it and it doesn't override. I'm not sure. I'm thinking it actually replaces it, which that's an optimization that I could do later on in case I need to tweak something and I generate the image again. There's no need to like re-upload that image to Cloudinary, but for now it works.
Yeah. My guess is it would have uploaded it next to it, unless you're specifying the ID, the
Mhm.
Cloudinary ID.
Yep, and that's where this comes into play because we're specifying the
Okay.
public ID to be learning_quick, and then the guest image name. It's specifically looking for that name inside of Cloudinary.
Gotcha. That's cool.
Yeah. I go up and down a lot on my desk, so I'm gonna take a couple seconds to raise my desk and stand up.
I didn't know we were going on a journey here.
It's always for people who have never seen me do that. It's kind of an awkward transition because they're like, "What the hell is going on? How is this stuff moving?"
Trying to chase the mic.
That's right. Okay, so now we've got a bit of Cloudinary stuff working, which proves out a good bit of this. Now we want to define I'll call it generate cover. And this is going to be, actually, it doesn't need to be an async function. Interestingly, I'll tell you why in a second. But we'll take in some params. I'll add more on that in a second. And the output of this, generate new image URL and return. That's basically what we're trying to do here. And these params, what I'm going to do is let's leave that for a second. Let's go ahead and export generate cover. So let's export that thing. Then inside of our endpoint, let us, after we upload the guest image, let's pull in the generate cover. Again, auto imports in VS Code, high five to VS Code. Let's do that and let's pass in the body. So we'll pass in all the parameters that we just took in, and then let's log that stuff over here just to make sure it's getting there. So let's do a log of params. By the way, I didn't specify this. Netlify Dev is a live reloading server. So every time I save, the stuff is reloading, which is why I'm able to take advantage of that as it comes in.
That's a beautiful thing.
Mhm.
When I was working with my Twitch bot server, I was having issues with that because you have to stop and start each time. I'm sure there's a solution out there. I just haven't looked it up yet.
I was going to tell you, and I was going to ask why you weren't using NodeMon. Have you used NodeMon before?
Nope, but I'm going to open it up in a new tab.
Colby, you're in for a treat. So NodeMon, you run a file just like you would with the node command, but you use NodeMon instead, and it auto reloads the same way this does. So it's a global package. So npm install -g NodeMon, or node daemon, some people call it. Do that, and you won't have to worry about that again. Yeah,
perfect. Thank you.
That's why conversations like this are great.
Lifesaver.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see if we call this function again. Let's just make sure that we see those params being logged. And I think we're logging it twice. So let's get rid of this one, but it is logging in the correct place in this generate cover. So what we'll do, we know what params we want to have. I'm not doing like Uber validation or anything in here. So I'm just going to kind of break these out. But we want to destructure the title, the guest name, the guest image name. This is actually one thing that needs to change here. And then the time. So those are the pieces of information that we want to put on top of this image. And the one thing that we don't have in place yet is when we get back, I need to double check where we grab this from.
And while you're looking that up, it looks like Dom said he thinks that it does not override unless you specifically set the override or overwrite property to true.
Okay, cool. So that actually, from a performance perspective, is better than what I was doing. So Cloudinary will take care of doing the check, and then it will basically just ignore from there. That's actually good. Let's see. So I think the only thing I needed to change and add is taking in, still confirming this, is taking in or passing in the new guest image name when I generate this thing. And the reason is that it needs to know what the image is that it's looking for. And that thing comes from this formatted name. So what we'll do is we'll take our body, and excuse a little bit of gross syntax in here. We'll spread out everything that's already in the body, and then we'll add on a property called guest image name, I think. And we'll say that that's going to be the formatted name. And that looks a little bit gross. We can simplify this a little bit by going ahead and naming this that way, and then having guest image name and that. So what I did was I renamed that formatted name to guest image name, and then I'm going to pass that into the generate cover along with all the existing properties that are on the body. That way I can get all the details I need inside of this function. And let's see, let's log now again, maybe just guest image name and time, just to make sure a couple of those things are coming through. Okay, so let's run this again. Let's test it out. Oh, I logged them out. I didn't log out the whole object. So it looks like that's coming, which is good. Cool. So now we actually want to generate this cover image, and this is something, Dom, since you're here, like I've kind of struggled with piecing together like how exactly these transformations worked and inside of the code, and I've eventually hacked away to the point where I was able to figure it out. But I mentioned that this function didn't need to be async. That's because this doesn't actually like interact with Cloudinary server at all. It's just a kind of a built-in utility in the Cloudinary package to be able to generate those URLs based on transformations, which is actually really cool. So let's do URLs Cloudinary dot. I'm calling the URL here, and what I want to pass it first is that the first file that we're starting with. So basically the backdrop that we're going to put stuff on top of. And this is going to be inside of that Learning Quick folder. It is the LG-BG-2, and that is this thing right here. So that's what we're going to put stuff on top of. And I'm wondering, well, let me test something out in a second. So the second property in here is going to be an object that has a transformation array. And I'm wondering if I do an empty array, what this will return. We'll see that in a second. And from this generate cover, I want to return that URL. So what we're going to do is add those transformations, which is pieces of text and an image on top of this. So let's test this out. I want to see, actually, inside of here, let's get the URL. And then let's just have that be the thing that gets returned from the endpoint.
So funny, for any of the dynamic things that I did with Cloudinary, for some reason I decided to write my own little URL creator. Oh, yeah? I'm not sure why I went that route, but I'm pretty sure that one would suffice quite nicely for that.
I imagine it would, yeah. And by the way, this one doesn't have any transformations, so you don't see any cool unique URL. So really what we're going to see here is basically that base image. And this is where we get the opportunity to build stuff on top of it, which is pretty freaking sweet if I might give Cloudinary a little bit of extra love here. So let's start with, I think, let's start with the guest image. And these are going to be like some specific numbers and things that have taken me a while to kind of figure out and play around with. So I apologize if it looks a little, this part is a little dry, but we want to do an overlay, and we want to do an overlay with a file that's inside of the Learning Quick directory. And then what's the file name that we're looking for? Well, that's the guest image name. So remember when we took Colby space Fayok and we converted it to Colby dash Fayok. So that's the image that we want to grab. And then we can set the height properties, height and width to be 500. And then basically these are, well, let's do one more. Radius is going to be max, which turns it into that circle. And then we've got some seemingly arbitrary values, again, that I've just kind of like tweaked over time. So our X and Y coordinates are going to be 150 and then negative 260. And then crop will be fill. So this transformation, if we've done this correctly, this is another, like if you have another drum roll in you, seeing this work will be a plus, I think. So what we want to see at the end is that that base image that we had will actually have Colby's picture on top of it. So let's run this whole thing again, and we'll get a new URL. You'll see that this is a longer URL because it's got some information in the query parameters. let's start this thing up. This usually takes a second. Cloudinary is doing some stuff, obviously behind the scenes to make this work. That just worked. So high five to me. Yay. But one of the things to keep in mind that I'm sure Dom would appreciate us sharing with people is after this image, after the image associated with this URL is created, that URL, that image will be cached. So they actually keep a version of this image based on that URL. And you can see that by every time we generate a new URL, it will take a few seconds. If I then refresh on this page, it loads almost instantly because now Cloudinary is not regenerating that image. It is basically just going to its cache or its like copy of that image and then sending that back. It's pretty cool.
Performance. It's always a
Yes.
win.
How are we doing? We've got about 30 minutes left.
Yep, little 28, 29.
Sweet. Cool. So the rest of this part is really just going through, and again, this might be a little bit dry, so I apologize, but the rest of this part is really just adding on those other pieces. So let's start next with the title. So we want to take that title and put it on. It's going to be an overlay. It will have a font family of Montserrat, not Serrat, but Serrat. Font size. Oh, and I'm actually almost did that wrong. We're in JavaScript, so we can't do dashes. We have to do underscores. Font size of 120. Font weight of 500. The text is going to be, we'll start with the title and then we'll uppercase that. So 2 uppercase. And then we'll do a text align right. Okay. So that's what we want to put on there. And then we need information about some of the other kind of metadata information about it. How wide is this going to be? Well, it's going to be 1,000 pixels. The crop is going to be fit. The color is going to be, and this is just one of my brand colors. So 0E142E, if I've typed that correctly.
It's nice that you have your brand color memorized because I totally don't. And now I feel embarrassed about that.
Nope, I don't have it memorized.
No?
I did
Okay.
have it memorized before I completely rebranded. I do not have it memorized now. So
Fair enough.
anyway, I've got notes for that just in case.
Makes sense.
I can't remember if I needed this effect property or not, but effects colorize, and then 3 more things to position this. So we can use gravity in here and say gravity is going to be east. And I think by default, it's starting out in the center. What we're saying is like, all right, start off east, start off on the right side of the screen. And then from there, we'll have an offset of negative 280 on the y-axis, which will push it up on the y-axis. And then x of 50, in this case, which I think will push it to the left on the x-axis. Some of those seem a little different than standard to me, so I've got some questions. But so let's see what that looks like. Let's just, and this is, I've done this a million times. You like tweak that setting, and then you come in here and I would open up in the wrong browser page because I've got the Twitch stream in the other browser. So let's come back over to this one. And let's see this one. Cool. So there's the cool Jamstack stream. This is not 100% optimal because, and Colby, we talked about this a little beforehand. I don't want it to just continue to wrap as much as it wants. Like I want to have a little bit of control over that. But we may or may not be able to fully address that. So we'll just kind of leave it here for now. Let's see. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is take I guess like your name would be the next thing. Or actually, one of the things that we can do is add the featuring piece of text. So this is a static piece of text that's just going to stay there. But it will follow a similar format to what we've seen, where maybe can I just do this and then copy?
One thing I'm actually curious,
Yeah.
the font that you defined, that's a Google font, right?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Do they have all Google fonts available?
As far as I know, yeah, you have access to all Google fonts. Yeah.
That's super handy to not have to worry about that kind of thing.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. So I'm just going to tweak this one a little bit. It's going to be a little bit smaller. It'll have like your average weight, and then it will have this one will have a color of, I do have this one memorized. This is just white. And this needs to be in a string. All right, so there's the color of that. We'll have the Y is going to be 500. Um, and this is, I kind of was learning these numbers. They're a little all over the place. And for this one, I put the gravity to be southeast. So instead of just saying, hey, start off on the right side of the image, this is saying like start off in the bottom right of the image. So hopefully what this will do is it will add that extra bit of text in here. So let's grab this thing again. And I would just click to open that, except for it opens in my other browser page. And then I have to copy and paste it to get it on this window. So anyway, this is maybe the better option. So cool. So that we've got our title up there. We've got our featuring section, and then we're gonna have two other things, just two. We'll have the guest name and then your title. Oh, three other things: guest name and guest title. So let's see if we can speed this up a little bit. So let's copy and paste this overlay. This one will be a bigger size. Let's say your name is going to be 95. The text here is not going to be hard coded. It's going to be the guest name, and then we'll again make that uppercase.
Text you got a nice shout out from Tros. He says that you're crushing it.
Oh, thank you, Tros. I appreciate that. Thank you. All right, and I think I made this one bold. So we'll bold that. This color will go back to this one. So let's copy this one. Again, like this might get a little dry just because now we're doing multiple of the same things, but that's what we got. So we'll have that color. The Y in this case, we want it to be a little bit lower. So it's going to be below featuring. Still going to have the same X offsite or offsite, not offsite, off. What's the word? Offset.
Yeah. Offset.
Yes, thank you. English is tough when you got a lot of pressure on you. We'll have the crop of fit and then the same gravity here. So the cool thing is, and maybe actually we'll just go ahead and do this one more time. That was for the guest name. And then we want to do basically the same thing for the guest title. So it'll be slightly different. Won't be bold. It will be a font size of 38. So it's going to be smaller. Same, actually, I guess I did change the colors in here. So this one will be white as well. And then we'll push this down even a little bit further to 350. And I think I needed a width in here just in case it was too long that it would allow itself to wrap. But the rest of the stuff stays the same. So that's adding on now. We've got our featuring piece of text. We've got the guest name and then the guest title. Again,
James, is this code going to be on GitHub later that people can take a look at?
This code is on GitHub. I'll grab the link shortly, or if someone wants to search on my GitHub. The project is JamesQQuick dash sanity. So I actually embedded these functions inside of my sanity project. And it looks like we've got our first error here. The guest title is not defined. I think I just missed that. So let's make sure
it took this long to get to an error. You're not doing too bad.
Yeah, I've also spent many hours like working building this up as practice, not for the stream, but just like actually trying to make it happen too. So all right, hopefully that will work. So again, we'll like regenerate this thing. Notice that it's kind of funny, this URL gets longer and longer, which there's nothing at all wrong with that. It's really kind of powerful that like Cloudinary allows you to bake all of that stuff into the actual URL, and then they take care of the rest. So again, give this a second. It's generating this image for the first time. Cool. So yeah, I'm impressed that it's going this well too. So we've got your image, we've got the stream title, we've got a featuring text, we've got your name, we've got your new appointed title and cool developer.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. And I think the last thing is getting into the actual time. And if you notice, this has a little bit of a red box down here. Like it's pretty subtle, but the time is supposed to fit in that box. And again, I spent lots of time figuring out how to get it to be space-wise exactly where I wanted it. So I'm going to copy, actually not that one, sorry. I'm going to copy another one of these and do this for the time. So we'll just duplicate that again, and we'll start up here. This will be time. And I think we could leave that uppercase. I think I decided not to. The font size of this will be a little bit bigger than what we just had. It will also be, and I don't need text align, but it will also be, let's get over here. Font weight will be bold. Is that right? Is it font weight? Where did I do this before? Font underscore weight. How did I change that? I bet I wasn't even using that. Anyway, font weight
So used to
bold.
CSS variables instead of React, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you end up bouncing all over the place. All right, let's see. We don't need our crop fit. We don't
And
need
just so you
a
know, we have slightly under 20 minutes left.
sweet. Cool. We're getting basically done with the core part of this, and then I think I can show off I don't want to touch my Airtable setup because I don't want to break it, and it's not like it's under like source code or source
Fair
control or
enough.
anything. So I will show off how it connects to all this in a second, and I guess we can also try to deploy this.
But
Anyway,
Brad said that he wants you to stop and just recap the entire thing because you have plenty of time.
um, if I finish, if we get the time on the screen, then I'll recap what we've done, since that'll be the end of like generating the image itself. All right. So inside of here, we're basically just changing the position. So we want this to go even lower, still has the same X offsite, and then it's got a width of 600. I think this should be in quotations there. Actually, maybe it doesn't need to be. I don't know. Does that need to be in there? Anyway, I guess we'll see. So let's run this again. Is that, we said Brad, is that Brad Gariffey, by the way?
Yes, sir.
Sweet. What's up, Brad? Let's try this new URL and let's see what we get. Though, like, I hate the awkward waiting for it to load the image the first time.
I need to have some kind of like waiting music or something.
Yeah.
I'll get sound effects, I promise.
So that worked out pretty well. It looks like the Y could change just a tad, like maybe up to 115 or something. So like we could play around. I don't think we need to today. Make sure I got, font size is right. Anyway, maybe it's because it's bold. I don't know. I would say that's probably good enough. So in recap, up until this point, what we did is we are able to send a request from Postman, include all of this information. That's where that backtick came from. Include information about a stream, what the title is for the stream, what the guest name is, the guest title, a URL for the guest image. So in this case, it's your image from Twitter, and then the time of the event. And it sends that request to a serverless function running locally with Netlify Dev. Netlify Dev, we will upload that guest image. If it doesn't exist, Cloudinary kind of takes care of the deduping for us. We'll upload the guest image, and then we'll generate the cover image, which takes the new guest image, overlays that on top of the background, and then it overlays the title, the guest title, the guest name, guest title, and then the time, and puts that all, I would say, on an image, but maybe more appropriately together in a URL, and that URL then represents the image. Yeah, maybe. I think the next thing I'll do is go ahead and push this, create a site in Netlify and go ahead and push this, and then we'll see if it works there. Colby, I will need you to, oh, that was the wrong way. That was work stuff. I will need you to take me off so I can do environment variables.
Sure.
Not right
Let
this
me know
second.
when.
Yeah,
Okay.
I will let you know when, but let's go somewhere. I had a Netlify site here. So let's take all this info. Let's see, we'll add all the things. We will say added some code, and I've got little snippets in here. So GGP is to push it out to GitHub. So that's push to GitHub. Let's do a new site. We'll get that site from GitHub. I don't want to authorize any Auth0 stuff. I'll search for my Colby repo. Connect this thing up. We don't need to run a build command. Say what?
I was just gonna say, did you want me to take you off for the environment variables now, or will you do that after?
Oh, I guess I can do that right now. Let's see.
Should I take you off?
Yes. Yeah. Go ahead and take me off.
Okay, you should be good.
All right. I'm gonna wait. I'm watching the stream. Okay, I saw it come through on my end just so I could.
Yeah, no worries. No worries.
All right. So what I'm doing is copying over those 3 environment variables that I had locally in the .env file, I'm now copying those over to into Netlify is what that
And don't
is.
worry, everybody, I'll send these values over to you in chat.
Thank you, Colby.
Yeah.
All right, there's that, and then this one. Hopefully that's good. API key, cloud name, API secret. It looks like it might be good. Give me one more second. I'll make sure I close
No
the source
worries.
file.
I'll wait till I get your go ahead.
As you secretly send them behind the scenes. Oh, I forgot. I'm still actually, you can still see my screen regardless because we're on Zoom.
Yeah.
All right, Colby, hopefully you are a trustworthy.
You could trust me. You could trust me.
Okay, I think you're good to switch back over.
Okay, cool. Switching over. I just realized though that we lost the timer because it starts it every single time. But I think you had like what 20 minutes left, or maybe like 15. So
I was thinking like 15. Yeah.
Yeah.
People in the chat, keep us honest. How much time did we have?
Yeah. I got to fix that. We were just talking before the chat that I need to. I want to do it so that I can start the timer from the actual chat asynchronously. So.
Yep. Absolutely. Okay, so let's this deployed like a random Netlify URL. I put that index page just to show that stuff was working. So here's a deployed version of that HTML page. And then what we can do if we're still testing here is now we come back to Postman, and this is like if you got another drum roll in you, this is a big one.
Somebody likes my light and gentle ones before, so I'll do it again.
Yes, please do it. So what we're doing is sending the same type of request. We're just now sending it to the deployed URL that's hosted in Netlify Functions. Didn't have to do anything other than set it up with GitHub, and it automatically should, fingers crossed, figure it all out. So let's send this thing off. This makes me nervous. We got back hopefully what is the exact same URL that we just had, but now it came from the deployed Netlify. So if we open this up, that should come through, hopefully. Oh, I think I did change one thing. I changed that tick, which is why it's having to regenerate this entire image. Cool. So that works.
The suspense was real though.
It actually, well, I was nervous because I was like, hey, we just did this. This should load really fast the second time. And it did not. And I started to guess, or like second guess what was going wrong. And just to give one more, if I refresh that, now it comes back quickly because I got rid of that back tick in the timer there. So actually that's like, I do want to show the Airtable portion of this, but in terms of building that was the really cool part. Or I say cool, I think it was cool. I don't know what other people thought. But that was the majority of the actual code. I will share in here though. And like, I have been really overwhelmed with how much stuff I'm doing recently. So one of my big goals was to automate the shit out of anything I could. And get some structure to the stuff that I do, which is where Airtable came in. I'm using it all over the place for a lot of different things.
Absolutely.
And so I found that there is now, where is this? Let's zoom in on this page.
And Brad just had a comment.
Yeah.
So from what he understands is that the serverless function essentially creates and returns a giant URL, right?
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I'm not doing any rendering of it. I'm not doing any like put it in a headless browser and taking a screenshot of that thing. I'm letting Cloudinary do all that work. I mean, they're good at what they do. At least that's my assumption.
While like a URL seems like a very simplistic thought and approach to it, like there's something beautiful about that for all the different transformations you can do with a simple URL for dynamic images.
Yeah. So yeah, Brad says it seems a lot easier. It's really nice. It took me a while to get the spacing correct. And there's actually one for reference, just so we see this in a little more detail. I had Mary on my stream last week, who was a coworker of mine at Microsoft, and we haven't talked in like 4.5 years. And it was so freaking cool to hang out and talk with her last week. But one of the things you'll notice is that the title on here, the first line is a different color and a different font size and font weight than the bottom one. So from a design perspective, it adds a little bit of contrast and it makes it look subtly a lot better than it had. But that came with something that's really tricky. And I mentioned this to you earlier, Colby, is if you let it auto wrap your stuff for you, you don't have control over it. So if I was just sending in this as a full title, it didn't look like what I wanted it to. So I ended up creating this helper function that would split the title into 2 lines based on how many characters were in how many given words. So basically, like the max amount of characters for the first line is 12. And so if I get to a word that takes me beyond 12 characters, that's now that and the rest of it goes on the second line.
That's
Um,
awesome.
and so what that becomes is you do that little split thing, and then for the title, where I have just one title here, there's basically like title 1 and title 2 is what it becomes in the actual like transformation. But it makes a big difference.
And because that's all code with the transformations, like you could really do anything programmatically like that with the
Yep.
functions. It's awesome.
Absolutely, yeah. So getting back to the Airtable stuff, they have these apps, and I forget the name of the actual app. It's like a script. Maybe it's just called script. I don't know. But I've got a script in here for create stream cover image, and I don't think there's anything private in here. Basically, what this does is it goes and grabs all the pieces of information out of a given record. So from that row in Airtable, it grabs, you'll see familiar properties here: guest title, guest name, company. I put the guest title and company together, and that becomes the guest title when I pass it off. But the guest image URL, and again, this comes from, actually maybe a good time to show this, the Z stream form. These are my text expander snippets. Super helpful, by the way.
Nice.
So this is my live stream guest form, and you'll see like they just fill in all this information: name, email, title, company, handle, link to profile picture is a required one, bio, and a few other pieces of information. So I don't have to input any of that information. I get it all from the guest. And then I have that button that will trigger the script. The script will grab those different properties. It'll check to make sure it has all of them. If not, it will return. Then it does a little bit of logging. So this is like logging stuff in Airtable. So you do output.table. It will log that stuff, and then it just sends a fetch request to that URL. Now this is a different Netlify URL, but it's the same idea. I've got a Netlify site .netlify/functions/ and in this case it was LQ cover for learning quick cover, and it sends those same pieces of information. So from Airtable, I click a button, and it basically does this. It grabs the information from the record, it sends that off, and then what it returns back is the URL. Now here's the super
That's
cool
awesome.
part. And automate all the things. TV is in the chat representing Airtable here. Aaron, this is the really cool
Nice.
thing, and I was desperately hoping that it would work this way. I get this URL back that comes from the Netlify serverless function. So that URL that we just saw, I get it back, and then I update the record that I'm on with that URL.
That's
And it
beautiful.
automatically hosts that as an image. So you can see that in the cover image property for this record, I just give it an object with a property of URL, and then it populates the actual image here. And actually, why don't we go ahead and test one of these live? What's one of these upcoming ones? The two things I need to do is make sure, like, I have to manually check to make sure the title fits. So does this one? I think Simon has a date. Yeah, so Simon's got a date. Simon has a title. Hopefully he gave me the URL for his image. And let's just see this work. Hopefully, again, the data has to be right,
Yeah.
which usually it is, but hopefully it is now. And this title might be slightly long. Anyway, we'll test it out. So generate, we'll kick off that script. You'll see some logging in here as it will do it. And hopefully what you'll see is that URL, you'll see that this thing is kind of loading an attachment type thing. And as it finishes loading, hopefully, looks like that one had an issue, and I don't know why, unfortunately. Can we take one of...
That's so cool that you can run the script like that right inside Airtable. I didn't realize you could do that.
Super nice. Yeah. I wonder if I didn't have some part of that set up. Anyway, so if that's the only thing that goes wrong today, that's okay. But anyway, so it should do that exact same thing with that we just saw, but it will take an additional step of adding the cover image based on that URL, and then that's in Airtable is listed as, what is this, an attachment, and it's actually an array of attachments, so you can upload multiple. So not only do I have the URL to the Cloudinary image, but then I also have it hosted in Airtable as well.
That's awesome.
Can I mention one other thing?
Yeah, go for it.
So my site is powered by Sanity. So even though I'm taking in information in Airtable through these forms, my site is still powered by Sanity, and I've got a bunch of other information in Sanity, blog posts and talks and courses and things in Sanity. So all that stuff is powering Sanity, and I realized I was kind of diverging, and I didn't want to have to copy over like all the information from Airtable into Sanity to get it to come to my site. So I have an add to Sanity button, which
Nice.
calls another script. And this script does again something very similar where it grabs all those properties and then it sends it to a Netlify serverless function, add stream to Sanity. That function has the logic to either create or update the record in Sanity so that I have all the information in both places. I generate the cover images with a button, and then I replicate that information over to Sanity with a button as well.
That's so cool.
I know I mentioned this earlier, but I'll grab a link to that repo if anybody wants to check it out.
Yeah, that'd be great. And I'll also post it in the show notes when I put this up on YouTube.
Yeah, and people can go and look at the full source code. There's a little bit more to it, but it's more or less the same type of thing. So here, who do I have a pull request from, or is that just from GitHub? Yeah, Axios.
Dependabot.
Yeah,
Friendly Dependabot.
That's right. Yep.
No, that's awesome though.
Anyway.
It's really cool to see what you could do with the Cloudinary app. One thing I want to show you quick, and this isn't meant to be like a plug, but if you check out what I have inside of the what I sent in the Twitch chat, so it kind of addresses the problem of having to design your it's just like a little demo I put together, honestly, to try to get a job at Cloudinary like a year ago. But
Nice.
but like it gives you the ability to kind of like play around with the different cloud name and stuff, and you can like go through and change the text and stuff. It's not like it doesn't have the complete API or anything like that, but
Sweet.
it just like gives you a nice little GUI to go through and kind of play around with this stuff. So
Yeah,
I thought it was kind of neat.
I love that. I like these are like me teaching a boot camp full of people who are about to graduate and looking for jobs. Like what a great example of a simple project in the sense that it's not like a SaaS product, but it's such a good representation of skills and understanding and ability to do research and learn a new product. Like this is a perfect example of something that people can do.
Oh yeah, and especially if it's like saving you time, like all the automations that you're putting together. It's it's a beautiful thing.
But I can't tell you how much it helps, and I've got like a million other things I want to automate along the way.
Yep, seriously. But yeah, that's awesome. Did you want to give like a real quick recap of around like the from start to finish, like just like what you built?
Yeah. So the goal for this whole thing was to automatically generate these cover images for my live streams. So I I receive information from people through a form. People fill out the form with their name and a link to an image and a suggested title and things like that. And anyway, so I take in all of that information, and since I had all the information, I didn't want to have to go to Figma each time, although it's not that big of a deal. I didn't want to have to go to Figma and update a template each time with all the information and the user's image and all that kind of stuff. So I wanted to automate it completely. So inside of Airtable, I have a generate button, and it will call a script that runs in Airtable that calls a serverless function in Netlify. That serverless function in Netlify will take in the different bits and pieces that are needed. So the guest image name, the guest image URL, the title, the guest title, and the time. And it will upload that guest image to Cloudinary. So you can see examples of that in here. So here's all the guest images in here. So it uploads the guest image, and then it basically uses this background image here, and then overlays a bunch of stuff on top of it. So it takes this as the background. It's taking a second to load. Anyway, takes that as the background, and then it puts all these extra transformations on top of it for different pieces of text. The output of that is a URL for that new file. And then do I have an example of this still up? There's one. So the output is this really long URL that includes all those transformations that sit on top of that base image And now I get to generate those things automatically from clicking a button in Airtable.
That's awesome. Nice job. And you definitely crushed it. You got through the hour challenge and you were able to automate some pretty cool stuff.
Sweet.
Cool. So after I do this little outro, I'm going to try to raid somebody for the first time, and I'm going to go ahead and try to raid Brad. But yeah, James, I'd like to thank you for accepting the challenge to face off on Colbyashi Maru. Everybody, please check out James's YouTube, where he has some awesome tutorials at youtube.com/JamesQQuick, and check out his Learn, Build, Teach community, where you can also find me as well as his new podcast at compress.fm. So next week we'll have Prince Wilson, who will face off against building a Discord bot with Rust. So James, before we go and try to raid Brad, any last words?
No, automate all the things. I don't know. Like, that's my goal.
I love it. I love it. All right. Sounds good. Well, this is Colby signing off.